This conference will now be recorded.
All right, I'm calling to order the meeting for the Harwich Historic District and Historical Commission for Wednesday, August 19th, 2020 at 5 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Historic District and Historic Commission on August 19, 2020 will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so via rebroadcast on Channel 18 if they're not logged into this particular meeting. Okay. So can I start with a roll call vote? Roll call, please. Brendan?
Julia Eldridge. Oh, sorry.
Here. All right. Julie Eldridge.
Here.
Jean Steiner.
Here.
Robert Doan.
Here.
Brendan Lowney.
Here.
Okay. All right. So the first item on our agenda is the proposed amendments to the Town Code, Chapter 131, Preservation, Article 2. So Jean, do you want to start with a quick overview of the draft?
Sure. It's fairly basic. Brendan and Bob and I were kind of a subgroup to look at the guidelines and the demolition delay. And we came up with kind of a focus on the demolition delay because it seemed like something that could be fixed more quickly in a way. And it was short. So what we decided to do was look at the things that we could live with that are in the current demolition delay, and much of it we were fine with. But we also found one thing we wanted to change and then a couple of things we wanted to add. And we did that by looking at demolition delay bylaws for a number of different towns in the Commonwealth, and then also looking at the recommended or the sample demolition delay bylaw for age-based properties that is offered by the Massachusetts Historical Society, excuse me. So the one change that we thought we should make is the time frame for demolition delays, which currently are at 12 months, and we feel that it's much more rational to have an 18-month delay. Several towns already have that, including Barnstable, Chatham, and Wellfleet on the Cape. So it's not like we would be out there without any similarity to other towns. And the reason for that is that from a building perspective, and Brendan and Bob are much more familiar with this than I am, but by the time someone gets the demolition delay, it's going to take another whole year anyway for them to get their plans together. So it's really not a big deal for them. They just wait it out. But an 18-month delay is a little more onerous, and it sounded like it might cause people to think a little bit before they buy properties with the intent of demolishing them. Then there were three areas that we wanted to add. One was a provision to the enforcement section that in the event of voluntary demolition without a permit, we'd have a 2-year period from the date of demolition before a new building permit could be issued. And that is recommended by the State Historic Commission, and it's also in place everywhere else on the Cape that I could find except for Harwich and Dennis. Everybody has a 2-year penalty, if you will. for a voluntary demolition without a permit. And then the second addition would be a section called demolition by neglect. And this is something that Orleans has put in their bylaws, and it seems very pertinent to some of the situations that we've seen before this commission in the more recent months. So we would have a demolition by neglect section, which also would have minimum maintenance requirements, and these are pretty much taken from the Orleans demolition delay bylaw. And then the third section added would be one on emergency demolition, and we would add a qualification similar to that in the Orleans bylaw, that when a building commissioner issues an emergency demolition, that they have to prepare a written report that comes back to the commission with the evidence of why it is being considered an emergency demolition. So those were the three areas. And then as I wrote up the draft, I tried to base it on the sample demolition bylaw from the Historic Society, the Massachusetts Historic Society, and then weave in all the things that seem to be existing in the Harwich document that we wanted to keep. The interesting thing is that the one from the state has a whole section on definitions that I think really something to a person who's trying to look at this and make sense out of it. It kind of codifies some of the terminology that's used throughout the document, and that's out of the sample bylaw, but a lot of other towns in the state have adopted that part, so I went through that. And then I also, in the document that you received, anything that's highlighted is something that we're, kind of changing a little bit. So certainly questions, any other thoughts about it? Bob's given me some input, and Bob, I did make that last change that you asked for on the, so you have the one I sent out, I think a couple of weeks ago, but in the one that I'm holding right now, I made that change for the neglect, the demolition by neglect.
So, Jean, I just want to let the board know that this whole issue came up at the planning board meeting when we were discussing proposed zoning district for the special district for West Harwich. And there was much discussion about demolition by neglect, so much so that really the Sarah Korjef spoke up and said, how rare it is to have a provision for demolition by neglect. And by the time I was able to finally pipe in, I did let them know that we were actually looking at it, that you folks had worked on a draft and we were looking at it at our next meeting. So I thought it looked, I took a first kind of look at it, and I think it looks fantastic. Obviously,
thank you. Well, I'm not an attorney, but I tried to make it flow.
It's going to have to go to town council anyway, to our council anyway, for a review.
Right. Figured that.
So with it. But the thing you need to keep in mind is really selling those new provisions to the population when it comes to town meeting.
Exactly.
Because, we've got to get it to a point where it's passable.
Right.
Right.
I thought it looked great. I haven't gone over it with pure lawyer's eyes to like follow definitions back to definition sections or anything like that yet, but that's what we have a town council to do. So I actually think, if with whatever comments we have here today, I think once we kind of incorporate those, I personally think it's ready to go to town council to try and do a markup for a town meeting review in such a way that it would be we could publish it for a public hearing. So.
Sure. And Mary, one other thing I was thinking about, we're asking for a little more involvement or engagement, if you will, from the building inspector. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't also get this in front of him or her so that they could make sure they were comfortable with it before it goes to the to a greater number of people.
And I think you're right with that. I think it's a conversation with Joe Powers as well as Ray Chesley to make sure that there's some buy-in on this section. I think from my perspective, one of the important parts of demolition by neglect is whether or not we can board up the building and put the cost of that onto a tax title account.
Right.
So from my perspective, that's a question for town council to see whether we can, as part of that demolition by neglect provision, say that after X number of days or X number of notices from the building department, that the building department has the authorization to contract to board up the building and to add that to a tax title account. That's another whole level of it. But from my perspective, it doesn't have a lot of teeth either if you're not able to kind of preserve the building ourselves. If everybody's ignoring you, you're still with the end result of losing the asset. So that's I think a conversation that should be had with the town administrator and the building inspector, and then ultimately town council to see if there's a way to work that in so that it's worked and approved. I've seen it done in the past, and I'm not sure what the background was in getting that to pass, whether it was leaps and bounds or just as part of their bylaw. But so those are really my only adds as far as a quick look at it before really any public comment. But it was quite the hot topic at planning.
Yeah, Mary. Yeah, the actually one of the questions we have, and just to clarify on the building inspector having to notify us for a demolition, that is within 30 days after it's been demolished. We're not going to force them to wait because if it's a hazard and needs to be demolished, that has to go forward right away. And that's the way I understand it. And does that sound okay to you, Mary?
I think it does. I think it's really outlining, what the criteria is for an emergency. We had that whole question with the lead paint issue too. So
right. Well, that comes to the other part of it is that when they just put up the sign like they've done in West Harwich, is that actually condemning the building officially, or I've heard that it's really declared to be unsafe to enter, and it's more for the fire rescue first responders? And is that a different category?
I believe it is, Bob, because I think if you notice, there are two different symbols that you sometimes see.
Oh, okay.
One may be condemned. One is no entry for police and fire for life-saving measures, so that they won't go in and risk their own life in a dangerous building.
Okay, so I don't know if our wording is correct there. It says whenever the building official condemns a building or declares it unsafe to enter, he shall notify the commission within 10 business days of that action.
That's a point that we can flag for council when they're looking at it and reviewing the language. Yeah,
and I do want to say, Jean's been saying Jean's the one that did all the work on this. We just gave some general guidance, and she's done all the research, the writing, and everything. So, really, thank to Jean for doing.
Yeah, but it was good to have a team to help me get through it. Hey, Mary, one other thing I thought of that is probably might be helpful. I did a document back in December, and I think I think a copy went out to everyone at one of our meetings in December for a draft on the recommendations for the bylaw. And on the second page of that, there's a grid with the various types of things that we were looking at, like the age of the building, the current time for delay, the daily fine, and the new permit thing, for several of the towns on the Cape. It's just a graph. I could probably get the other town information. It wasn't readily available on online, but that might be helpful to have, for further discussion with Joe Powers or whomever, just to say this is what the other towns are doing.
But if you have time to pull that together, I think that would be helpful, because it's all about selling it. The only other
Sure.
thing that just came to mind, when we had the issue on Forest Street, and we had talked to Ray Chesley, I seem to recall that we had at one point asked if after demolition we could require an inspection post-demolition. So we may want to revisit the topic with both Joe and with Ray. I know we're crazy busy in the department right at the moment, but it seems to be a second way to keep people honest to what we've allowed in a demolition permit and what actually gets demoed in real life. So kind of like the similar to an as-built, it's an as-demolished kind of inspection.
Right.
Any thoughts on that from a builder's perspective?
I would agree. I mean, if they present one thing to us and they do something completely different, you're not adhering to what the permit was issued for, I guess is.
I mean, the point was that the building inspector typically does not go back and look at what's demolished. And so you're saying, Mary, that we should maybe put some wording in that in a partial demolition, the building inspector should inspect within X number of days or something?
Or at least prior to the issuance of a building permit, so that we would know what had been, you'd have some baseline as to what had been done or hadn't been done.
So when you do that, do you apply first for a demolition, then a building permit? Can you do them simultaneously?
I believe you do one and then the next. Correct me if I'm wrong though, Brendan, because I'm not in that office.
I believe so. I mean, because if you try the building, then it'll get kicked back. That you would need to go in front of historic anyways. So you would probably apply for. I mean, do you need a permit for demo? No, it just depends on the extent you're doing. So, but anyone who's taking down a structure, yes, would need it. So that's a question for Ray, and every inspector is different through all the towns. I'd have to probably talk to Ray about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking in the Forestry Case where I would have suspected once they got it by default because we didn't meet in time. So then he just went and just got a building inspection. A building permit. Did he even get a demolition permit? I don't know.
So with Forest, no, he demoed without a permit and without. So he had come to us, and we had. I think he had. I don't remember if it was for non-action or if it was he had said he was going to, in his application at least, it said he was going to do X, Y, and Z, which was whatever he had told us was exactly what he had told Zoning Board of Appeals for his variance application, and then he didn't. He had exceeded both applications.
But I thought it was a case where we did not have a meeting in time. So that's how it got by us, because we never voted on anything with him.
So I don't remember that off the top of my head. If that's the case, he still would be bound by what he said in his application.
Right, and that's what we got him for, because he clearly did not follow that.
Right.
But I'm just trying to think of I was just trying to review the mechanism that if we were to write up something, how would that be worded? On the demolition side, because I assume if they get a demolition permit, they do both at the same time, And so I don't know when the building inspector would know when to go and look.
Yeah, I mean, usually when I pull permits and we're doing big demo, we're submitting plans and we're just getting a building permit, and the demo is covering it. Just to get a demo permit, I don't even know. I'm sure that exists, but usually you just go right in that size. Because I remember I was in the audience for that. I wasn't on the board when that was going through. But I do remember they had plans and they submitted to the building department. And I remember, so I don't know how we got involved in having them come, but there was a deadline that was missed. But yeah, anyways, they were supposed to save that portion.
So he'd have to go for variance before the zoning board of appeals. And I think it made the same representations to the ZBA as to what was remained, was getting removed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But as I recall, when Ray came into our meeting, he had suggested that, because I think in our situation where there's a demo, an intent to demolish under our demo delay, they don't issue the building permit until they get the decision from us.
Right.
Right. So perhaps in those situations there is a way to actually have an inspection done as a part of the building permit application process. So certainly I think that's something we're interested in. There's no reason not to ask. It can be, we can certainly at least ask for input and see what they'll say.
In the towns where they do have that and they have the 2-year delay, I mean, that's working in other places. So if someone voluntarily demolishes a building without the permit, without getting the permit, or without having the board or the commission vote on it, then they delay a building permit for 2 years, right?
Right. Well, so what I'm talking about is exceeding the demo that was allowed, right? I mean, I think demo without a permit speaks for itself with the 2 years, but I also think there's a loophole. There may be a loophole where you have a demo permit, and if nobody's really checking to see, well, you were supposed to save the stairs and the mantle, or you were only a door and a wall, and you ended up taking a whole wall down. There's a difference. I think
it would be a rarity that someone took down a house without a permit. It just wouldn't, unless someone took down like a barn. But to take down the main structure of a home, it would be a rarity to have any site work. The guys would want to see the permit. It'd be a very, I don't think that would ever really happen.
Yeah, I think
you have utilities and everything involved in that. You can't just go in.
There's way too much involved, for someone just to do it.
But I think the point of this particular discussion is there a mechanism we can catch these before it goes too far, so the builder or whoever gets in trouble or that we find out that it's been done, because, if it wasn't for driving by, nobody would have ever noticed that building that he didn't do it. As the building inspector says, no, we don't inspect these until it's about finished when we do our regular building inspection.
Right, and in the case
I think it's that,
in the case of Forestry, I only knew about it because somebody came into town hall and said, "Hey, I drove by. What happened? The house is gone." And I went, "What?"
Oh my God.
I remember going by it and having the paper in hand because I was trying to review the different things we were going to talk about, like the next night or something, and there was nothing there. I mean, it was just bizarre.
And the sad part is once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
Because very few people are like Brendan who rebuild.
I'm a little crazy enough to do it.
One other thing, if I could just bring up, are we on the section? It's on page 2, and this is nothing new, but it's what a significant building is. Have we all re-looked at that to make sure that we're still good with that and that we're covered okay? It seems like the 4th bullet point is pretty much open to our interpretation of and architecturally important, but I just didn't know if there was any Any thoughts from anybody on that?
So my only comment on that was I can recall in our current draft wishing there was a defined term in a couple of places. So that was one of the things that I wanted to take a look at as far as rereading the draft in more of a final. But I think that is true. I think it's really our determination as members of the board as to whether we determine that it's historically significant to the town.
If you watch one of Chatham's meetings, you'll see that they actually start with that language that the building in front of us is deemed a historically significant property of the town of Chatham. So they actually do say that if they want to keep it under their jurisdiction. So something to think about, or just take a look at one of the meetings. But you'll see it. They use that verbiage a lot. Not exactly what I said, but similar.
Yeah.
But the point is, the fourth bullet point is the building is historically or architecturally important. So most of ours are probably more architecturally important, not historically.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
I think you can make that leap to, the architecture ties to the town's history. It doesn't have to be, the 1700s. It can be to the 1870s, right?
Right.
Yeah. And how about on page 4, Mary, the alternatives to demolition? I know you've brought that up, whether we have the power to be able to look at alternatives. Is that still something?
So I think it's all what you can get people to agree to.
Yeah.
Right? Because some people, unfortunately, are willing to wait out the 12 months.
Yeah. No, but I just want to make sure that we're comfortable that, we have made agreements with people before, and it seems to work. And I just want to make sure we can continue to do that.
Yeah, because right now on the 100-year delay, if it's not in the district, then we really just can either say yes or no to the demo. That's really our power. But the negotiation is something that's always been in question, correct? Is that what you're saying, Bob?
Well, no, I don't think it is in question, because it says right that we can look at alternatives.
Right, and we define that. Okay.
And so I think we do have that power, and we haven't done it lately, but in the past we've done it. Well, we kind of almost did it with the down in Harwichport, when he agreed to move this wall and stuff, and we allowed the demolition, and that was on the new plans to make some changes to make it more historically like it was.
Right.
I think that's something that we do regularly have the power to do.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think the other way to look at it is the applicant has to be willing to say yes to those too, right? So because they can always just say, nope, I'm taking it away from you, and I'm gonna wait out my 12 months or my 18 months.
Oh yeah. And that's happened many times.
But no, there are certainly we did it on the house on Davis, on the corner of Davis and Bayview.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was a good compromise. They were keeping 90% of the structure. There was a change in the windows, and one chimney was out of the 3 was going to be removed, but they were staying on the same footprint. So that was a good compromise. But I guess my question is it something that we suggest to them, or does it just naturally happen in the meeting? Is there a time when we should step in and be like, because we don't want them to go home angry. We want every resident to have a good experience.
Right.
And if they don't know about the compromise, then that could be an issue. But it'd be nice do we let them know every time, or is that always going to be up for negotiation?
So I think part of it can come from guidelines,
Mhm.
certainly guidelines for the historic district. Perhaps we expand guidelines to historic demolitions, if there's a way to kind of do that. But otherwise, it really is a matter, in my own opinion, it is a matter for the public meeting, so that it's not backdoor conversations. It's all in public, in front. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, a lot of people don't even think about the fact that they have a historic house and that this is going to be a problem for them. 90% of the population thinks, well, I bought this house, it's mine, and I can just knock it down, and they have no idea that there's a demolition delay.
Right.
And some of that's on the contractors too that are doing the work. Some know about it and some don't, and you see it every day, I'm sure. But I can remember one of my first meetings having an applicant before us, and the applicant was there by themselves and as I was sitting there, I realized, had no idea that we could have imposed a 12-month delay and they would have been up a creek without a paddle, because they just had no concept. They were told to go to the Historic Commission meeting, and they had no idea what our vote could possibly have done to their timeline. So, some of that's education too. There's always applicants that just have no idea about it and never will. So, perhaps that's a thing we can think about is maybe some information when it comes to on the notice of intent application for what our remedies can be.
Yeah.
Making it clear that there is a potential for a 1 year or an 18-month or a 2-year delay or a 2-year delay if it's voluntarily demolished.
Yeah, that's a great. That'll get your attention to think of alternatives before you come to the meeting as well, and be prepared.
Yep.
Mary?
Yeah?
Mary, is there anything a realtor discloses significant, for Harwich alone? In other words, is there something that could piggyback that they would have a document they have to give to somebody buying in Harwich that there is this demolition issue?
Good question. I'm not sure what, typically brokers have to disclose the pertinent facts about a house. I mean, I don't know that necessarily comes up in the everyday conversation, but certainly we can reach out to a few and find out what they do or don't say, or what they do or don't have, and how they do that communication with.
Well, we know it doesn't work from a volunteer standpoint, because for the most part, if they don't have to disclose it, they won't, because they don't want to discourage the sale.
Right.
I mean,
and they also they don't work for the buyer; they work for the seller. In nine times out of 10, they're working for the seller.
Yeah.
So that's where
Good point.
Like you said, a buyer's agent. I would expect a buyer's agent to be looking for something like that. It's not typically something that's going to come up on from a lawyer's perspective. It's not something that's going to come up automatically when I'm doing a purchase and sale with somebody.
Right.
So.
I think I had asked that question when I came onto this committee soon after I came on. Are people aware when they're purchasing homes, that if they decide to do any sort of renovation work, that they might have to come in front of the board? And is there anything on the town's website or something that can easily be picked up by, like, a little handout or something at town hall or wherever, or, I'm just curious. I don't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julie. I wonder if Sarah Korchef has anything that covers like the Cape on that.
That's a good idea.
Because it must be an issue for all the towns on the Cape, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I would think so, because real estate brokers work all over the Cape. They're not just right in one town.
Right. I wonder. I'd be happy to call her and ask, or email her and ask, because I think that's important. I mean, I think that's part of what gets a lot of people upset, because they haven't been told or given that information. So they think that they're buying a property that they can just tear down, and that's not the reality.
Right.
So are there any changes that we want to make to this one? Do we want to add in some provisions about a post-demolition inspection? Do we want to add any of those kind of into a draft, or do we want to have a conversation with staff before we even put it into the document? What's the pleasure?
I think it would be good to put in something what Bob and Jean were saying about if someone is coming in for a demo permit, that before they go into for the building permit, an inspection is done to see, hopefully, that they adhered to what they were going to demolish. And if there's a way of doing that, like Bob, I think, was asking, is there a way to try and capture that before a building permit is issued?
Jean, are you comfortable making a couple of changes to this from our discussions tonight?
Sure, I'll go through and figure out where the best place is to put it, and I'll put some language together and then run it by everybody.
Perfect.
And the idea is that the building inspector needs to inspect the property prior to issuing a building permit after the demolition has taken place.
Right, under a notice of intent demolition, yeah.
Right, okay.
Do other towns do that? Do you guys know?
I don't remember seeing anything like that, but I can go back and look. I've got all that stuff saved, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
Any other comments about this?
Thank you, Jean. You did a great job.
Well,
And Bob and Brendan.
but we've been talking about it for a long time, so it's
Yeah.
nice to finally feel like it's going someplace.
Absolutely. As I said, it was a surprise to everyone at our planning board meeting when we talked about it. So
Yeah.
that was good.
Do you want me to send the draft to Sarah Korchef at all? She was very interested in what we were doing because I called her at the beginning to get the sample demolition thing. I can wait till we get it.
By all means, please do, because she's been heavily involved in the drafting of the West Harwich DCPC special district too.
Okay.
And for example, one of the conversations we had is it referenced, so they have built in an incentive into the zoning bylaw that for not demolishing historic structures. So we did talk about putting in just a caveat that that any demolition to a historically significant structure would still be subject to the demolition delay bylaw. But,
Right.
you know, just make it clear that it was called out, that it wasn't just, you know, no demolition was necessary. So, by all means, feel free to send that along to her.
Okay. Then I'll ask her about the Realtor thing too at the same time.
Yeah.
That'd be great, because, you know, ultimately it's to get this to as close to a final as we can, so that then we can, when we send it to the lawyers, we want them to take one pass at it, or, you know,
Right.
another minor one, and not have to do it, you know, 12 different times. So I thought it was a beautiful start.
Great.
I truly think it's almost there. I mean, a couple of tweaks, and let the lawyers do what they need to do to it in order to get it ready for a hearing.
Perfect. All right.
So if we're good with that, the next item we have is the zoning bylaw. Now, just to put a little background to it, the application was back in December. We need to put zoning bylaw in place.
We've lost you, Mary.
Yeah.
And I just came back in. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, you can't see me. For some reason, I got bumped out, so I don't know if you voted on the last thing, but I was bumped out. So,
We, okay, let's see.
Somebody's muting us. Must be Mary.
Can you all hear me again?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
So we've got Brendan in a couple of different times, but that's okay. Brendan, we didn't vote on anything. We just agreed that Jean's going to make a couple of other changes and send it off to Sarah or Jeff, and we'll go from there.
Oh, did we lose him again?
Brendan?
Yeah, I think.
Brendan? He's on. He's showing up twice.
He is, because he had to come back into the meeting.
It's a little more difficult to use than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
I know that we heard that there were some issues through work today of people connecting into some meetings also. So I don't know.
you guys are able to hear me now.
Oh, now we got you. Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. You just can't see me, right?
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
So
Oh,
I just wanted to give a little background with the
Oh, we lost you, Mary.
We lost you, Mary.
Is it any better now?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to give a little background on the West Harwich DCPC. The original application was approved by the Cape Cod Commission back in December of 2019. So we really have a year to get something done. So the decision was made to kind of do a basic zoning ordinance or basic zoning bylaw so that we had sufficient zoning ordinance in place by the year end and then to move forward.
I think we lost you, Mary.
Can anybody hear me?
Now you're back.
Oh,
I'm
Brendan's
on the
left again.
landline too.
There's like
I'm
there's like a lot of feedback when you're talking.
Is it me
Yeah,
or
and
maybe?
there's no reason why to have feedback because I'm on a landline phone with no speakers on my computer.
Now you're good.
So maybe we'll stay just like this and hopefully I won't move. So did anybody have any comments on the DCPC draft?
I didn't get the draft. Did you get the draft? Okay.
It was
It's
attached to the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
Oh. Oh, there it is. Page 2. Or page, nope, not page 2, sorry. There it is, okay.
So I can walk you through briefly and just, point out a couple of the highlights.
Okay.
From one of the items that they wanted to tackle was adding some properties to the list of historic structures. You'll find that on page 2.
Okay.
Yep.
Then if you're looking through, there are some incentives with the pre-existing non-conforming structures that you might want to read through under 325-152. And you will see when you read through it that there are some incentives for preserving the historic structures. And just so that you can see, there is a map at the very back, and the map outlines where the, special district actually is.
Now, the map has a red band, and then it has this black outline.
Yep.
Which is which?
So the black line goes to the back parcel. It's the back property of the parcels.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the, I didn't see the key there.
Yep. And then the colors show.
Yep. Got it.
So they want to make
Okay.
that whole area to the west end as the West Harwich Special District.
Correct.
Okay.
And if you look in the opening paragraph, it says the intent of the bylaw is to encourage and incentivize the retention, preservation, creative reuse, change of use, or expansion of use of the historic structures to the extent possible.
We have to vote on this, Mary?
No, we do not have to vote on this. This is still, it's going to be referred back to the planning board from the Board of Selectmen, and then the planning board will hold a public hearing. So we can certainly take some time and look at it, and if the board wants to make a recommendation before that public hearing, then we can always jump in with a quick meeting to review the draft and make a vote. So it's not a problem. We don't have to rush anything tonight.
Okay.
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 Yeah. I want to look at that.
Wow, it's nice to see this is actually moving forward, though.
It is.
They've worked on this for so long.
Oh, there've been a lot of people involved in that too,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, they have.
So if you have any questions on any of it, Charlene is probably the best person to field questions on details with it. I do believe it went to Selectmen and should have been referred back to Planning Board. So as soon as there's a public hearing scheduled, I can rifle off an email to everybody to let you know when it is, and if we want to schedule a quick meeting to do a final review and a vote, we certainly can, if you want to support it.
Okay.
Anything else?
Do we have any applications coming in at all?
We had none for today. I don't believe we have any coming up for our next meeting either so far.
Okay.
Nothing yet. And I think we've got another couple of weeks. I think we've got another week and a half before the deadline.
Right.
Oh, for this, for the planning board?
No, I mean for our next historic meeting.
Oh, our next, okay. I'm sorry.
I don't think there are any applications as of yet. When I last talked to Elaine. Surprising because it's been so busy. But then, slow down for 2 months. So is there anything else that people would like to see on the next agenda?
Just follow up on the proposed demolition delay changes.
Yep, that works for me. I think we keep both of these items on the next agenda whenever that ends up being,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there.
Yep.
That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if there's nothing else, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Bob has made a motion.
second.
Jean has seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Jean?
Yes.
Brendan?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes?
Bob?
Yes.
And Mary makes it unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will
you.
talk soon. Have a good
All
night,
right,
everyone.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Um,